All right, let's get started with our 3D stuff. So I'm going to go back here to the original logo PSD. I'm going to right click that and I am going to duplicate it. And this one we're going to call logo-3D, but we're going to put, as I said before, last name -logo-3D. Okay, and that's the one I want you to go ahead and open. So I don't want you to mess up any of your other stuff. Now, one of the things that we did in our last demo, whenever we made the 2D example, is that I went ahead and converted the logo that I was going to use to be a shape. Well, for this one, we definitely need to have it be a shape because we're going to convert it to a 3D object, and if I don't do that, then I'm going to have two separate 3D objects that are going to move separately, and that might be okay depending on what it is you're trying to do. You actually might want to do that. You might want to twirl one part of your logo and the other one can do something different. But for what I want to do, I think that I want to keep it together just so it'll be a little bit easier and more compact. So I'm not sure which one of these I would want to use. I believe that I probably am going to want to use the filled one and not the outline. And so like I did before, I'm probably just going to go ahead and make a duplicate of my type layer, and then that way I have the original in case anything goes wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rename this as Spire Outdoor Adventures, and then I'll call it Shape, right? Because I'm going to convert this one into a shape. So I'll right click it and I'll come down here and I will find not convert to smart object, but instead convert to shape. It's an easy mistake to accidentally choose the wrong thing. And so now if I go and I take my selection tool, you'll see that that is in fact a shape. So, and again, I want to go ahead and I want to join it. I'll put it first inside the mountain with mask, and I'm just going to go ahead and put it down below the mountain. And I'm going to join these two together or unite them. So I'll select both of them, and while I've got my vector selection tool chosen, I'll go up here to layer and I will choose combine shapes and go to unite shapes. And then now I've got this as one individual shape. Let's turn off this outdoor adventures layer. In fact, what I'll do just to make it uneditable, I'll lock it. I'll turn off the visibility, and that sort of will protect us from seeing it or using it. All right, so now you can see that that logo is all one thing, right? When I select it, everything is outlined in blue. So that's good. All right, so that's a good start. Now, I can also go ahead and turn off my background fill. And I want to start thinking about, you know, turning this into a three-dimensional object. I'll start bringing in images in just a minute, but let's just go ahead and jump into a 3D space. First of all, I'll go ahead and save this, and the next thing that I want to do is I want to, well, let me back up real quick. The other thing that you could do if you wanted is if you wanted to go ahead and turn on your little bounding boxes so that it's easy for you to see what's going to be visible and what's not going to be visible. This actually might be very helpful to you. So I'm going to, but I will turn the opacity down just a little bit so that it's not too obtrusive, right? And so we can sort of see these overlays. And I think that that's probably pretty good. Now, the other thing I was going to say before I backed up is that it's probably a good idea, since we're about to start working in 3D space, to go ahead and change your work space. And so we can go up here to Window and choose Workspace, and we're going to choose 3D. So if you didn't already do that, then you can go ahead and do that. And what that will allow you to do is move around the 3D space a little bit more easily. Now, my 3D space probably needs to be reset. So if you want it to look the same as mine, I'll go ahead and I'll reset. Oops, I didn't mean to turn that off. I'll go ahead and I will go to Workspace, and then I'm going to say Reset 3D so that it goes back to the factory reset. Okay. And the one thing that I will also say too is that I don't always like the way that everything gets reset, so I will, still sometimes move things around. But anyway, the basic setup is that it will show properties at the top, and then it's got 3D tab, and then layers, and then channels here at the bottom. And sometimes I like to be able to see 3D and layers at the same time, but generally speaking, I like to be able to go back and forth between them, but properties is usually the thing that's always pretty important. So just for the sake of making it a little easy for you to understand what's happening, I'm going to move my 3D layer separately from my regular layer. I should say my 3D panel separately out from my layers panel. And the reason for that is because there are going to be some things that you need to see that will actually be required that I click first on the layers panel before certain other things become available in some of these other panels. And I want you to see that relationship, and I want you to see it happen as I'm doing it. And so let me go ahead and I'm going to save my file and the changes that I've made so far. And I'm going to collapse this Instagram sizes thing. Now I need to first select this layer that's got my shape. And before I extrude it or turn it into something that is 3D, I want to go ahead and make a backup copy, just in case, right? I might use it for something, who knows what. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lock this layer. Actually, I'm going to unlink it. Let's just say unlink. Well, actually, we'll leave it. And I should actually also go ahead and create backups of these shapes as well. And so I'll just drag those down here. And we will keep those three things linked. And we need to make sure that, let's unlink this one. That was a mistake. Okay. And then we will link these three things together, because that's the way it was. All right. And then I can also lock these copies, these backup copies. And that way, when I turn off the visibility, right, and then if I really wanted to, just to preserve everything, I can go ahead and I can put those in a group, and I can just call this backup 2D logo. Okay. And that's probably not 100% necessary, but it's something that I like to do. I'll go ahead and save my files. I like to make backups of things if I don't think that they're going to put a lot of taxing extra memory requirements or processing requirements on my computer. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do with these. Now, I don't necessarily need these shapes, but I'm going to kind of hang on to them. I'm not going to combine them with my other shape, but I want to show you a couple of things that can happen whenever you try to make a solid shape out of something that's got this mask inside of it. So we may or may not want to keep the mask, but let's just take a look and see what some different things might end up looking like. Let's go ahead and select this, and you can do one of two things. You can either right click over here where the words are, and you can go down to the very bottom where it says new 3D extrusion from selected layer. That's one option. The other option is that I can come over here while this layer is selected, and in the 3D panel I can select 3D extrusion and go ahead and create. All right, and then a couple of things you're going to notice right off the bat is that you get this thing up at the top, and this is called an orthographic view, and you can look at what the different options are. You can say top, you can look at it from the left, you can click this, look at it from, front, which is exactly what we're seeing. And orthographic views literally are without 3 dimensions. It's literally only in 1 dimension as a flat drawing. And so we're going to go ahead and go back to the regular one, which is top, but it allows you to kind of get your bearings and get some measurements and stuff about what is actually happening, because sometimes 3D virtual space can be kind of confusing. All right, and so there are a couple of things right off the bat that I want to kind of go over before we start mucking around with this. All right, because it's a pretty confusing space if you've never done anything with 3D before. All right, so first of all, there's some basic things that I want to talk about in terms of these panels. Layers, anytime you want to make sure that you're adjusting something in the 3D layer, is you've got to make sure that the layer is actually selected in the layers panel. And you'll notice right here where I'm circling my cursor, there's a little cube that gets placed on top of the thumbnail in the layers panel for that layer. That means that it's become a 3D object. All right, and so that way you'll know that that is a 3D object. You'll notice whenever I go and I select some other layer, let's just select this, all of the 3D stuff goes away so that I can't accidentally move something according to the other layer. Any 3D object is going to automatically give you all these features as long as this move tool up here in the left tool panel is selected. If I select like the marquee tool, again, it goes away. So a basic thing that's important is that you have to have your 3D layer selected in the layers panel along with this move tool selected before you can do anything really in that 3D environment. Now, that being said, let's look at this 3D layer. So when I select that, there's some other things that are happening. And if you look down here in this 3D panel, it shows me contextually the information about that layer that I have selected in the layers panel. All right. Again, if it's not a 3D layer, like if I click over there, I get the options to turn something into a 3D layer. If it's already a 3D layer, I get the information that tells me about that 3D layer. Okay, so I've got some things that are happening over here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it, right? So the first thing is that I just clicked somewhere and the properties panel just changed up here. So again, properties is contextual based on what is selected in this 3D panel. What is in this 3D panel is contextual based on the layer that is currently selected, and the move tool has to be selected. Okay, so that's where some of this gets a little bit confusing. All right, so the first thing that is probably the most confusing to a lot of people is how do you move around the scene? Well, if you have the wrong thing selected over here in this 3D panel, then you're not going to have a fun time. So the way that, let's just click off somewhere. Let's go down here. And if I go back to this layer, it's selecting the last thing that was selected. So what you want to do is you want to go where it says current view, okay, and it's got a little camera next to it. If you go to current view, it shows you things that are based on the view of the camera up here in properties. So if I have current view selected, the other thing that's true is up here in where it says 3D mode, I've got this little button that is by default going to be the first one that is activated. It's called the orbit tool, and it looks like it's, you know, orbiting. It's got a little circle with an arrow at the end, and this will allow you to orbit around the environment. And what I'm doing is I'm just clicking and dragging and moving around. It might take you a minute to get used to it. Okay, and then you'll notice also as I orbit, there's something that you keep seeing with this grid, and that's called the ground plane. All right, so your object is automatically going to start on the ground plane. And if you take a look over here, let's orbit back this way. All right, so the blue line shows me the z index, or the depth index. Okay, the red line is the x-axis, and the thing that you can't see at the moment right now is the green, which is going to be up and down. You can see it over in this corner as like a little legend. The green is up and down, and that's going to be the y-axis, okay, the vertical axis. And so anyway, while you've got current view selected, I can orbit and move around. This is called roll, right? So you can roll like this. All right, I'm going to undo that. And by the way, every time that you make some change with your camera, it literally adds that thing to the history. So one I want you to be kind of careful of is that if you have limited memory, or you have limited steps, or you're on a slow computer or whatever in terms of keeping track of your history, then it's going to be really important that you don't go crazy constantly moving this camera around, because eventually you're going to lose the ability to step backwards enough times, right? See, every single time I grab something like this, is called, I can use this to slide left and right or up and down, right? Every time I do that, see, it just says set 3D camera position, right? So that is something that's really kind of important to know. I'm just going to jump back here in my history to actually, I'm going to jump in my history back to where it says extrusion from layer mask. And then that way I can stop worrying about what's happening with my 3D camera. All right. Anyway, so let's jump back over here. Make sure that we've got current view, and let's finish talking about this. This one right here will allow you to zoom in or zoom out of the scene. Okay, and so you can play around with these. It takes a second to get used to them. But what's really important, I think, is that we orbit a little bit so that you can see what's happening a little bit more with your extrusion. And then I can grab this tool and sort of move it up, and you have a better sense of what's happening.